Hello, everybody. Welcome to Books and Looks. I'm Jen, and if you are new here, hello, welcome. Thank you for watching my video. And if you are a returning viewer, thank you very much. I'm so grateful for you coming back and watching more of my videos. What I do here is I combine two of my favorite things, playing with makeup and reading books, and I put them together into a video where I do a get ready with me, put on my makeup, while I talk about a book that I have recently read. So, without further ado, let me get started. So, my book this time is, I actually had to return it to the library because it was a library book, but it was called The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry, I believe is how you say it, Fikry, of A.J. Fikry. And like I said, I already returned the book to the library, but here's what it looks like. That's what it looks like if you want to find it and read it. It was good. It was really not the kind of book that I typically read. It was just your standard realistic fiction. And it's about a guy, AJ, and it's about his life. I enjoyed it. I thought it was really cool. There were some things that I would change if I, was the editor, but I really did like it. So let me tell you about the story and what happens in it, okay? So, like I said, it's the storied life of A.J. Fikry. So A.J. is the main character, and he's like a middle-aged man, like in his 40s, and he's a widower. His wife died, I don't know, like 2 years ago from, I believe it was cancer. And so now he's like sad and lonely, and he and his wife owned a bookshop together in this small coastal town, island town, off the coast of Massachusetts. And hold on, let me tie this back. Oh, I think I'll just leave it like that. Anyway, so they own this bookstore, and after she died, they lived in an apartment above the bookstore. And after she died, he just got like really lonely. He kept his bookstore open because it was like her dream. But also he loves books too. So he's living his life, sad, lonely, and occasionally this girl, Amelia, would come from the book publishers up in the city, like, I don't know, I guess Boston. Yes, Boston. And like sell the latest titles, right? Like, here are the latest titles. Would you like to buy any copies for your bookstore? That kind of thing. And so like, that's what's happening, right? Well, one day he goes for runs an errand or goes for a walk or something, and he just, for whatever reason, chooses not to lock his store for that, half hour or whatever that he's out. And when he comes back, he finds a baby, abandoned and like left in his bookstore with a little note that said, I can't do this. I want my baby to be raised around books, okay? So AJ's like, oh my gosh, what do I do? He calls the police, and this police officer, who, whatever his name is, I can never pronounce it, so I'm just going to call him Officer L, because they always called him by his last name the whole story, so I'm going to go by Officer L. So Officer L comes, and he's like, okay, do the paperwork, blah, blah, blah. Well, as it turns out, AJ decides to adopt this baby. He doesn't really know why. He just feels like inspired, like he ends up with the child for like the weekend because it was Friday night and everything was closed and blah, 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 blah. So they couldn't do anything about legalities and like who's going to take the baby because whatever, which that's inaccurate. If there's a baby abandoned, they will find a social worker from Children and Services to take care of it. But that's neither here nor there. It's a story. So AJ ends up adopting the baby. And in the meantime, well, not in the meantime, but like slowly, the story is from like that point until, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. So he ends up becoming good friends with Officer L because like this like triggered the whole relationship, and Officer L becomes baby Maya. We're going to call her Maya. I'm bad. If you have seen my videos before, you know I'm not good at this. Forget all the names. We're going to call her baby Maya. So Officer L becomes baby Maya's godfather, right? And AJ and L become close friends. So, also, another important person in their life is AJ's deceased wife's sister. And I also don't remember her name. It was something unique also. I'm going to call her Betty. I know that's not unique, but I'm just going to call her Betty. I'm so sorry. I'm awful with names. Anyway, I'm just going to continue telling the story. So, Betty is married to David, whose name I do remember. David is a published author, and he's like pretty famous and reasonably wealthy. They have like a nice house, and they have been trying to have children, and like she's had multiple miscarriages and whatnot. And also David cheats on her, and like everybody knows he cheats on her. She knows, AJ knows, it's just like a thing. But David like comes and hangs out at the bookstore occasionally because he's an author. But then also like because AJ's deceased wife, I think her name was Nicole, her sister comes by and visits too, because like it's her deceased sister's, widower. So she comes by and she like checks in on him and just make sure that he's okay and helps out, make sure he's eating and whatnot, because it's been 2 years and he's still very depressed and very sad and very lonely, right? So Betty, wanting to have a child of her own, ends up kind of sort of being a surrogate mother type figure to baby Maya, because she's always hanging out and visiting anyway, so she just kind of helps out. And so that's like all the relationship. As AJ is like raising baby Maya, he slowly obviously comes out of his shell. He's not as depressed anymore. He has a reason to live. He loves this baby. He teaches her to read. She's very smart. When the baby arrives, she's like 2. So I shouldn't really call her a baby because she was kind of sort of talking a little bit. So maybe more like 1.5. Because like she can say like mama and little things like that and hungry, and like she's eating grown-up food, which is helpful for AJ to take care of her. But you don't find out what happened to the mom until about 1/3 of the way through the book. And as it turns out, the mom offed herself, right? She walked into the ocean and let herself drown. Which, side note, how does one do that? How do you let yourself drown? Like, wouldn't your natural survival instincts like kick in and you would swim? Or like, I don't know, but here nor there, the mom died by drowning herself in the ocean. Because remember, this is a little island town off the coast of Massachusetts, right? So anyway, so he's raising this little girl, and because he doesn't know what he's doing, he starts these like mommy group book clubs at his bookstore in order to make friends with other moms and get help and advice on what to do with this little girl. So he ends up making good friends. And of course, there's a small island town. Like everybody knows about AJ and Nicole who died and how he's depressed. And he's the only local bookstore in the whole town and, stuff like that. Oh, and of course they know all about the baby. It's like the gossip of the town. So he ends up becoming friends. Like Officer L becomes like his best friend. They hang out together regularly. His sister-in-law comes over a lot. In the beginning of the story, she had just had a miscarriage, so she's like sensitive and whatnot. But it's good. It's all good, and he's like coming out of his shell, and he has a reason to live, and things are good. Now, one thing what I did not like about this story is the timeline was. The pacing and timeline was not my favorite. So each chapter would be like a little vignette or a little snippet of their lives. And it would be like a day or two in the life of, and the characters would have conversations and go on adventures or whatever. And, he and Maya grow really close, and the sister-in-law is involved, etc., etc. But then in the next chapter, maybe the next chapter is like a couple of days, a couple of weeks later, but maybe the next chapter is 5 years ahead. And it doesn't say like, this is how far in the future it is. This is how much time has passed. You just have to infer. But like sometimes it's really easy to infer because it's like, it's the first day of kindergarten, or, Maya going out on her first date or whatever. So you can figure out that a significant amount of time has passed. However, not always. And sometimes it took a while to figure out where they were in the timeline. So that happens, and like it was difficult to keep track of the timeline and like when it was and how much time has passed. However, on a positive note, something I really liked about the story is that at the beginning of each chapter, okay? At the beginning of each chapter, at the beginning of each chapter, there was like a little, I guess for lack of a better term, it was like an not an epilogue. Epigraph. There was like an epigraph. And the epigraph was AJ writing a letter to people. I'll tell you who the people were in a minute. But he's writing a letter. Sometimes, you know what? I'll just tell you. Over the course of the story, AJ and Amelia get closer and closer. At first, it's just like weird and uncomfortable because he's standoffish and this, sad and lonely widower when Amelia comes to sell books to him. But when he ends up with Maya, it kind of opens his eyes to the importance of relationships, and then he slowly builds this interest in Amelia, and Amelia is interested in him. And there's a little side subplot where Amelia is actually engaged to somebody else, and so AJ won't do anything, but they break up, and so AJ asks her out, and they end up falling in love, getting married. Amelia moves to the island with them and then commutes to work in Boston, which is like an hour and a half each way. It's like a whole to-do, but she doesn't always have to. She travels a lot. She doesn't always have to like go into the office because she's a bookseller. So she travels a lot, but she moves in with them. They buy a house together. She becomes Maya's like stepmother and adopts her, and like they grow this beautiful family over the course of the story. It's lovely. It's a very happy little situation. So the epigraphs, some of them were written to Maya and some of them were written to Amelia and some of them were written to both. But it's from AJ, okay? AJ, and his letters are all about, it's like he's writing his my favorite books that I think everybody should read list. And what's really cool is the epigraphs all had some hint or something to do with like what happens in the story in that chapter. So for example, at one point the epigraph earlier in the story, the epigraph is about Edgar Allan Poe and his favorite couple of stories by Edgar Allan Poe, and then in that chapter, in that chapter, we find out that as a bookseller, obviously, he has this very rare copy of Tamerlane by a Bostonian, which is Edgar Allan Poe's very first published book. It didn't even have his name on it, right? And there were only like 50 or maybe 500, maybe 50, I don't know. A very small number of copies were ever published, and there are only a small number still in existence because they were published in, let's see, he was born in 1809 and he published it when he was 19. So it was published in the late 18 teens, like, no. 1820s, in the late 1820s. Sorry, I don't do math, I do books. So he has this one copy and he keeps it in his house. But one night he was like sad and lonely, and he was drinking, and so he took the book out to look at it when he was quite kind of tipsy, and then he left it out on the coffee table, and then he passed out, and the next morning it was gone. So it was reported stolen, right? Because it was worth like $150,000. Because again, it was Edgar Allan Poe's first published book. There were only a small number, so like it was a very valuable, rare book, and it got stolen. And this is important. It will come back. So anyway, so that happened in the beginning of the story, and then it was like only a day or two later that baby Maya showed up. And the police officer, Officer L, actually said, if Tamerlane, your copy of Tamerlane had never been stolen, I bet you would have never found Maya because, that's what it was. When he left his store, and left it unlocked. I think he was like going somewhere to do something about the book search. Like he was going to check to see something. So it had something to do with his book. So Officer L always said, like, you know what, the loss of that book, I get it was awful, you know, that you were robbed and this, with your, you know, your only one valuable thing, which he was planning on using to like, I don't know. He was saving it to use the money for something. Like he's like, one day I'm going to need this money. So I'm holding on to this. I'm going to sell it, like maybe in my retirement, or I don't know. So he's like, you may think like, oh, your whole future plan was ruined, but honestly, it saved your life, because if you hadn't left the store to go deal with your book stuff, Maya would have never ended up in your life, because the mother wouldn't have been able to get into your store and blah, 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 blah. So he's like, okay, yeah, but whatever. I still want my book back. I want you to keep trying to find it. P.S. They do find it. Let's see. Oh yeah. So that was the example of like one of his epigraphs where he talked about his favorite book was Edgar Allan Poe. And then in that chapter, one of his favorite books was by Edgar Allan Poe. And then in that chapter is when his copy of the Poe book was stolen. And then there was like another one where it was the story called, A Good Man is Hard to Find. And I forget who the author was. Excuse me. Not sure what's going on here. Sorry for my technical difficulties here. But okay, we're just going to go with it. So, another one was, yeah, A Good Man is Hard to Find. And that's the chapter that he and Amelia finally got together. Again, like A Good Man is Hard to Find. Because he finds out that she broke up with the man she was engaged to and is now, you know, available. So, the epigraphs were a really cool part of the story. I really enjoyed that. Number one, I liked hearing from AJ's point of view what some of his favorite good books were and why. And they were, like I said, they were all written to like either his wife or his daughter. So they were like little tidbits like, Maya, I think you'll enjoy this book because, or Amelia, you once told me that this is one of your favorite books and I finally read it and you were right. It's amazing. This is, you know, and then talks about like why he really enjoyed it. So it was really cool. It was like little letters as the epigraphs. Well, so the story's progressing well. And then towards the end, AJ, throughout the whole story, was having all these weird little episodes. As it turns out, he has a light form of epilepsy, the kind where you just kind of zone out and stare for a few minutes and then come back to and don't remember the last however many minutes or an hour or so. And it's a known medical condition and it's not that big of a deal. So he just lives with it, right? Well, unfortunately, as a separate medical situation, he ends up with a brain tumor. And they don't recognize it as a brain tumor because a lot of the symptoms can be attributed to this epilepsy situation that he has, right? So like whenever he will occasionally forget things, or when he will occasionally mix up words or can't remember words or says things that are like, what? That doesn't make sense. They would attribute it to his epilepsy episodes, right? And they would just be like, oh, you must have had an episode recently. Well, as it turns out, like and then he starts to get like headaches and his memory and his word issues start to get worse. So he finally goes to the doctor and he finds out he has this brain tumor, right? Well, it's terminal. It's operable, but even the operation will only give him like maybe another year or two to survive with the surgery, right? And it's extremely expensive, and he doesn't have health insurance. He's a small business owner. His health insurance doesn't cover something like this. So they're like, oh gosh, what are we going to do? Okay. Meantime, other plot. His sister-in-law, who I've been calling Betty because I can't remember her name. Betty and her husband, David. Remember, he's been cheating on her. Everybody knows she's had multiple miscarriages. Their whole story. She's involved in their life because she's, you know, the aunt and also wants a baby. So she's kind of like involved in the child's life. Well, you find out closer to the end of the story that, let me back up a little bit. About 3/4 of the way through the story, she confronts her husband and is like, I want a divorce. Look, I know you've been cheating on me since the beginning. and I can't do this anymore. Like, you're never here. You travel so much for work, and you're just like having affairs left and right. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. And he's like, what are you talking about? But of course, he doesn't say anything. But when she has this conversation, they're driving home from something, and it's like the last straw. Like, he was flirting with somebody right in front of her, and that was like the last straw. Like, okay, we all know you're cheating on me, but like now you're literally doing it at a party in front of everybody in front of me. And so she pulls her car over and is like, I want a divorce, blah, 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 blah. And while they're pulled over, it's not that they were pulled over like wrong or whatever, but because they were pulled over, I guess it was like close to a curve or whatever, a car comes by and hits them on the passenger side. What happens is it hits them from behind, and they move into the line of traffic, and then another car comes and hits the passenger side, and David ends up getting killed. So now she's a widow, and she's like, she has to deal with a little bit of it because she's like glad that it happened that way. She didn't have to deal with the divorce and everything. It's over. And then she starts dating Officer L because like they're such a close-knit little family, right? And he's like had a little crush on her for years, but she's a married woman, so he didn't do anything. Well, now she's a widow, and they start dating. So again, remember, the timeline is really weird, right? The whole story takes place over like 20 years, and it's a smaller book. So Officer L and Betty end up dating. He moves in with her. They're doing really well. It's a really positive relationship, right? And so one day he's like looking for something, and he opens up a closet and he sees this little girl's backpack. And he's like, why does she have a little girl's backpack in here? He has a cop. He's like, suspicious. So he looks in it, and what does he freaking find? He finds the missing copy of Tamerlane. The sister-in-law has it the whole time. She had it the whole time. And so he confronts her about it and was like, what is this? And then she tells this whole backstory where, as it turns out, this part was a pretty good little twist. I mean, I saw it coming, but it was still fun. It was still a good twist. As it turns out, baby Maya is her husband who died in the car crash. Her husband had an affair with this girl some years ago, right? And it produced a baby. And the mother came to town to try to find him and say, like, listen, I don't need you in my life. I don't expect you to like leave your wife and come be with me or whatever, but because it was just like a one night stand, and you know, it happened. And the mother was like, I need financial help. I'm struggling. She was a college student and like a mother, and she didn't have family, and like she was struggling to make ends meet. And she's just like, I can't, like, I need a better place to live now that I have this baby. I need this, that, and the other thing. But the problem is, she never found David. When she came to the house, Betty opened the door, and Betty was like, absolutely not. Like, I don't know if you're telling me, even though she knew, like, this woman is telling the truth. David's had affairs. He probably has babies everywhere. But Betty was just like, no, absolutely not. You're a liar. You're trying to take money from us because you know he's a famous author and that we have money. Like, no, just go away. And like sends her away, refuses to hear her. And that's when the mom is like, I don't know what else to do. I can't do this. I need help, and I have nowhere else to go. This was my last resort. So the only thing she can think to do is like, I'm going to leave the baby at a bookstore since David's an author. Maybe it'll somehow make its way, I don't know, somehow figure out a way to get them together, right? And then she offs herself because she can't take care of this baby and doesn't know what else to do, right? She's at her wit's end. It was really sad. But then as it turns out, Betty was like devastated because she knew the whole time. Oh, and she had the backpack because for whatever reason, they just let the little girl left her backpack there. Like, that was just a quinky dink. But how she got Tamerlane is, I forget why the sister-in-law, Betty, why did she steal the book? She had a reason for stealing the book, but I don't remember what it was. Like, she went over to AJ's house and found him like passed out on the couch and Tamerlane laying on the table because remember he was drinking and he like left it out. but I can't remember why she took it. She had a reason that made sense when I was reading it, but I don't remember. And then, like, when the whole thing happened with the mother and Maya ending up in AJ's bookstore, she's like, I can't just return this to him now. Like, now's not a good time. And then, like, time just kept passing until the point where she's like, well, now I can never, like, everybody thinks it's stolen. There's a police report. There's a baby in the life now. This is clearly not the path that I can take for this anymore. So that's basically why she was like, yeah, not gonna happen, right? So that's the big secret of the end. It was David's baby, and sister-in-law Betty stole Tamerlane and just couldn't do anything about it for whatever reason. And again, there was a reason, and while it wasn't like a great reason, it was like a reasonable reason that I could understand. Like, okay, I can see how that might happen, but I just don't recall what it is at this point. So anyway, he has his brain tumor, right? And they can't afford to do it. Well, that was when Officer L was like, you need to return this book to him because he has a brain tumor and they need money to pay for this surgery. And if he sells Tamerlane, he'll have like $100,000 to pay for this thing, right? Well, so they decide to do it. They decide to return it and explain everything. And of course, AJ's like a little like, what, WTF, right? But also, thank you for my book back. We need this money. They end up selling it. They get the surgery, and he stays alive for like another year rather than dying in like 6 months. He stays alive for like a little more than a year. But anyway, he stays alive for longer. And Amelia and Maya have like their best time together with him in his last months. And it's a happy ending. He slowly dies, but this is when you find out that AJ was writing all of these things to his wife and daughter on his deathbed because this tumor took away his speech capabilities. Just wherever the tumor was, it was like in his speech part of his brain. And he couldn't talk anymore. And so in order to communicate and leave like his legacy to his wife and daughter, it was to write these little things and say, this is, I love you, and this is what's important to me, and these are my memories of you, and like my legacy, so to speak, right? So it was actually really sweet because at the end of the book, you come to find out that all of these epigraphs were his like last messages to his wife and daughter, and he dies at the end, and his funeral is like overrun, and because unbeknownst to him, he was like, you know, a beloved member of the community, and he had all these friends, and everybody loved the bookstore, and even though it was like always just barely keeping afloat, the town always like they knew like this is a staple to our community. We love AJ, we love Amelia, we love Maya. This is an important aspect to our town. And so Amelia and Maya continue to run the bookstore after he dies. And you've come to find out that like so many people, it was a nice little ending. It was a good book. I really liked it. Like I said, the main issue was I didn't like the pacing where it would be like, it was cool because it was like little vignettes, but then like I never knew how much time would pass into the next chapter. It might be a couple of days, it might be a couple of years. So I just wish there was a little bit more at the beginning of the chapter, more of an indication about where it was in the timeline. But overall, it was cute. I loved the epigraphs. I loved the story itself. I liked AJ as a character. It was a good book. I would recommend it. I would give it like a 7 out of 10. I did like it. It's not my usual type. The only character that died was the main character, and it wasn't until the very end. Nobody was murdered. Oh wait, David did die in the car accident, but you know, I liked it, and I think you should read it. And that's the end. This is my look today. I went with a fall look. I've got like a fall shirt on. It's fall, so I did some like oranges and browns and some nice neutral lips. This is kind of my huge, only this orange thing was kind of a specific for the fall. I feel pretty, and I hope if you do this look, you feel pretty too. And then that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you were entertained by the book and the look. And comment below if you know the story. If you know anything about it, if you might want to read it, let me know what you think. Like, yes, I'm going to read it, or no, that's not really my speed. Book recommendations. Always love book recommendations. Of course, I have like 5 million books on my TBR, but hey, what's 5,000,001, right? Let me know what you think I should read next. If I end up reading a book that you have recommended, I will be sure to shout you out. And yeah, like, subscribe, comment, all those things. And yeah, have a wonderful day, weekend, everything. Have a wonderful everything. And as I always say, stay beautiful inside and out. Mwah. Bye.